Joyce retired about 9 years ago. She gets Social Security every month. She has savings, actual money, sitting in an account, untouched. She posted a comment on a retirement video last year. 2 words, help me. Not because she's broke. Not because the market crashed her portfolio. She's uncomfortable spending money that is technically hers, money she spent decades putting away. And the longer she doesn't touch it, the more it grows. And somehow that makes it harder, not easier, to spend. I've seen this pattern more times than I can count. Michael Kitz's analyzed 115 rolling 30-year periods going back to 1870. About half of retirees who withdrew 4% annually ended up with nearly 3 times what they started with. Not because they were lucky, because the math compounds quietly in the background while they're busy being careful. So we have 2 retirement problems. The one everyone talks about, running out of money. And the one almost no one talks about, having plenty of money and not being able to bring yourself to use it. Joyce has the second problem. And if you've been a disciplined saver your whole adult life, there's a decent chance you will too. This video is about problem number 2. Before we get into the psychology of it, we need to understand why that $2 million number happens in the first place, and why most retirees don't realize their money is still compounding. Start with Dennis. He retired 4 years ago with $500,000. He's been withdrawing regularly, living his life, not thinking too hard about it. He checked his balance recently, $700,000. He posted, "I'm on track to die with $2 million. Not bragging, just stating what the math is doing to him without his permission. The 4% rule was never designed to be the safe number. William Bengen built it in 1994 specifically to survive the absolute worst historical sequences, retiring right before the Great Depression or right into the 1973 oil shock. He wanted a number that would hold up in the worst 1% of outcomes across 115 years of market history. That's a survival floor, not a comfortable default. What actually happens in average and good sequences, a 60-40 portfolio has returned roughly 7 to 8% annually after inflation over long periods. If you're only pulling 4%, you're leaving a net 3 to 4% compounding every year. Over 30 years, that's not addition. That's multiplication. Run the numbers quickly. $600,000, no withdrawals, 7% average return. 30 years, you'd end up around $4.6 million. Now, add 4% withdrawals, inflation adjusted, every year. After 30 years, the median historical outcome still leaves you with $550,000 to $600,000. The top 20% of outcomes. Over $1.2 million. You withdrew for 3 decades, and you still have what you started with. According to BlackRock's To Spend or Not to Spend report, 40% of retirees still had 100% or more of their original retirement savings after 17 to 18 years. Not because they didn't spend, because the portfolio kept outrunning them. That number matters because it shifts the question. Most retirement planning asks how to make sure you don't run out. The data suggests a different question deserves equal time. Why are you holding back when the math says you don't have to? If you've saved your whole life, this isn't a character flaw. You did exactly what the system asked you to do: save, delay, protect. Nobody told you there was a second chapter where the rules change and the discipline that built your wealth starts quietly working against your enjoyment of it. One more thing worth naming. There's a structural reason the 4% rule stays sticky even when your situation doesn't require it. Advisors compensated on assets under management earn a percentage of your total portfolio. If your balance drops from $600,000 to $400,000 because you're actually spending, their income drops with it. That's not a conspiracy. That's just how the incentive is built. The advice you get is shaped by the system the advice comes from. The math and the historical record are both on your side. The part that isn't is something else entirely. I used to think the biggest retirement problem was not saving enough. Turns out there's a quieter problem, and it affects more people than the obvious one. You can know the math. You can have run the Monte Carlo simulations. You can have watched every retirement video on YouTube and still sit down at the end of the month and not spend any more than you did last year. That's not ignorance. That's a system running inside you. I've started calling it the saver's lock. It operates on 3 levels, and most people don't recognize any of them until they're well into retirement. The first is how your brain prices time. Psychologists call it hyperbolic discounting. Your brain values $1 today more than $1.10 next month, even when you know the math says otherwise. In your working years, that bias helped you. It made saving feel urgent. In retirement, it flips on you. You end up sacrificing a real experience at 65 to protect a number on a screen at 89. The second layer is the endowment effect. $600,000 in your account is concrete, visible. It feels safe because you can see it. A trip to Japan, a lake cabin, flying your grandkids out for a week, those are abstract. That $6,000 trip has to compete with a $600,000 certainty. It almost always loses. Your brain isn't comparing dollars to dollars. It's comparing certainty to uncertainty. The third layer is the deepest one, identity. For 35 years, being a saver was part of who you are. It was discipline. It was responsible. It was you. Now someone, maybe a video, maybe your advisor, maybe your own spreadsheet is telling you to spend, and somewhere in your chest that feels like betrayal, like you're undoing something. That's not irrational. That's just a wiring that was never meant to be permanent. Then there's spreadsheet Steve. I've come across this type more than once. The person who runs Monte Carlo projections weekly, adjusts the grocery budget when the S&P moves, treats retirement like an optimization problem. One version of this story ends at 71, with cancer, leaving $380,000 untouched for kids who didn't need it. Not because he didn't care. Because the thing he was measuring wasn't the thing that mattered. And here's the trade off that almost nobody says out loud: spending in retirement isn't flat. Research on actual retiree spending shows a curve, high activity and expenditure from roughly 60 to 72, what planners call the go years. Then a natural slowdown from 72 to 82. Then costs rise again after 82, but almost entirely because of healthcare and long-term care. The saver's lock tends to keep you conservative during the go years, the exact window when you have the health, the energy, and the ability to actually do things. You're protecting yourself for 82 while 67 quietly slips past. The real cost isn't financial. It's the years you had and didn't use. There's a comment I keep coming back to. Maria, 61 years old, single, no kids, wants to retire in the next few years and stop waking up anxious. She wrote, every video I watch talks about couples. I don't know if the math applies to me. It doesn't. Not directly. And this is the biggest blind spot in almost every retirement conversation you'll find online. The Kitz's research, the BlackRock report, the Monte Carlo simulations, the baseline assumption running through almost all of it is a married couple with a combined Social Security income around $4,000 a month. That's the benchmark the industry builds around. It's not wrong. It's just not universal. Here's where the gap actually shows up. A couple with $600,000 and $4,000 a month in Social Security needs their portfolio to cover roughly $24,000 a year to hit their spending target. That's exactly 4% of $600,000. The math fits cleanly. A single retiree in 2025 averages about $1,976 a month from Social Security. Same spending target. The portfolio gap looks almost identical on paper, still close to 4%. But that's where the similarity ends. A single retiree has no survivor benefit, no second income to absorb a bad market sequence, no one to split the fixed costs, mortgage, utilities, insurance, car. Real, World spending for a single retiree runs only about 30 to 40% lower than a couple, despite having one income stream instead of two. And when one partner in a couple passes away, the survivor typically inherits the higher of the two Social Security checks. A single person has no equivalent backstop. Same withdrawal rate. Structurally different exposure. So if you're single, here's a framework worth running before you apply any number you hear in a video built around couples. 3 buckets. Simple check. Bucket 1 is survival Social Security, plus any fixed income, pension, annuity, part-time work. This needs to cover at least 60% of your baseline monthly expenses. If it doesn't, your portfolio is doing heavier lifting than the standard models assume. Bucket 2 is quality of life. The 4 to 5% you're withdrawing from your investment portfolio. Not emergency money, not healthcare reserves. This is the money for the go years, travel, experiences, the things that require you to be mobile and healthy. Bucket 3 is emergency and health, 18 to 24 months of expenses in something low risk, high yield savings, money market, short-term treasuries. For a single retiree, this isn't optional padding. It's the backup income a spouse would otherwise provide when markets drop. I don't have a perfect number that works for everyone, but I have the right questions to help you find yours. And the first question isn't how much do I have? It's what percentage of my monthly expenses does bucket 1 cover? Last week, someone reached out to 58, single, $820,000 saved. She asked, "Am I okay?" The honest answer is it depends entirely on what her bucket 1 covers. If Social Security and a small pension cover 65% of her expenses, she has real flexibility. If they cover 40%, the math feels different even with $820,000. Same balance. Very different situations. If you apply the couple's framework to a single retiree situation without adjusting, you'll either pull too little and keep underspending, or pull too much without realizing you've lost the safety net the model assumed someone else was providing. Either way, the numbers you're working from don't quite match your actual situation. There's a hospice doctor who was asked once whether she'd ever heard a dying patient say they regretted spending too much money in retirement. She laughed, said she hadn't. Not once. What she heard instead, the trip that never got booked, the hobby that never got started, the years that passed quietly while the account balance went up. I'll be honest, I've had that same moment. Looking at a number on a screen and thinking, is this actually enough? Knowing the math doesn't automatically dissolve that feeling. What it does is give you something more reliable than anxiety to make a decision from. That's the setup for everything in this section. Step 1. Set your spending permission number. Your saver's brain needs a specific threshold before it feels authorized to spend. I can probably spend more doesn't work. A concrete number does. Here's a simple check. If your portfolio balance at the end of this year is higher than it was at the end of last year, even after withdrawals, you have room to increase your withdrawal by 10 to 15% next year without affecting your long-term trajectory. This is the core of what researcher Michael Kitces calls the ratchet principle. You're not guessing. You're reading a signal the portfolio is actually sending you. Bob retired 5 years ago with $900,000. He'd always wanted a $60,000 sailboat. His advisor flagged it as risky, so he waited. Then his wife was diagnosed with Parkinson's. The window closed. He's 82 now with $1.4 million, and the boat is still just an idea he had once. The trade-off for skipping this step isn't abstract. People who don't establish a spending permission number tend to withdraw 30 to 40% less than their portfolio can actually support during the first decade of retirement. That first decade is almost always the best decade. Step 20, build a 2-year cash buffer. The fear underneath most retirement anxiety isn't I'll run out of money eventually. It's more specific. The market will crash exactly when I need to sell. That fear has a name, sequence of returns risk, and it has a direct solution. When you separate 18 to 24 months of living expenses into a high-yield savings account or money market fund, you've removed the scenario your brain was actually afraid of. The portfolio can drop 25%, and you don't sell a single share. You pull from the buffer. You wait. The portfolio recovers. Someone in a comment thread described it this way: I keep a cash bucket equal to about 3 years of spending. I pull from that. When the portfolio's up, I refill it. I sleep fine, not a complicated strategy, just a lock removed. For a retiree spending $5,000 a month, this buffer is roughly $90,000 to $120,000 sitting in something stable. The rest stays invested. In the 2022 correction, when the S&P dropped around 20%, people with this structure didn't panic sell. People without it did, locking in losses at exactly the wrong time. That's the difference between a bad year and a permanent setback. Step 3. Run your actual numbers with a forward-looking tool. Most retirement anxiety is vague. And vague fear is the hardest kind to manage because there's nothing concrete to push back against. When you run a real projection, your specific Social Security amount, your actual portfolio balance, your real monthly expenses, your realistic withdrawal rate, vague worry turns into a specific question. And specific questions have answers. Someone shared this recently after running their numbers for the first time. I didn't believe it right away, but I liked having something to look at. That's the first shift. From free, floating anxiety to anxiety with data attached. Morningstar's 2025 State of Retirement Income Report puts the baseline safe withdrawal rate for a 30-year retirement at 3.9%. But with a flexible strategy, pulling back slightly in down markets, taking a little more in strong ones, that number can reach 5.7%. The gap between those two rates, applied to a $600,000 portfolio, is $10,800 a year, $900 a month. That's a real difference in how retirement actually feels to live. This isn't a recommendation for your specific situation. If you're in a high cost of living state, if you're single, if you had children later, your numbers will differ. The point is to know your numbers, not someone else's. You can keep deciding by feel, or you can run a simulation. It's free. Understanding that fear and lack of information are two separate problems, that took me longer than it should have. You can be fully informed and still be afraid, but the right information at least tells you what you're actually afraid of. 3 steps. Not a cure, a system. And the difference between someone like Joyce, 9 years retired, Social Security only, hasn't touched her savings, and Dennis, 4 years in, $700,000 and climbing, isn't luck or discipline or even knowledge. It's whether they have a structure their brain can trust. Ray retired at 60 with $650,000. 15 years later, he had $1.5 million. Annual income around $350,000 from investments. Spending under $50,000 a year. He posted a comment recently. It had 29 likes. He'd just been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Don't save too much. Enjoy your life. You deserve it. The money part was fine. The timing wasn't. Retirement doesn't move in a straight line. The spending research is pretty clear on this. Expenditure runs high from roughly 60 to 72. What planners call the go years. You're mobile. You have energy. You can actually do things. Then it naturally tapers from 72 to 82, not because life gets cheaper, but because activity slows. Then it climbs again after 82, almost entirely driven by healthcare and long-term care costs. The window where money converts most directly into lived experience is roughly ages 65 to 75. About a decade. That window doesn't wait for you to feel ready. So, there are really 2 paths from here. The first is what I'd call the fragility path, not because it's reckless, but because the rigidity creates its own vulnerability, withdrawing a fixed 3 to 3.5% regardless of what the market is doing. No cash buffer separate from the portfolio. living conservatively through the go years just in case. The typical outcome, dying with $1 million to $2 million untouched. The actual risk isn't sequence of returns. It's underspending and regret. The second is the resilience path. Withdrawing 4 to 5.5% with some flexibility, pulling back slightly in bad years, a little more in strong ones. 18 to 24 months of expenses in a low-risk account, separate from the portfolio. Using the go years while you're actually in them. The typical outcome, leaving behind less on paper, but having lived more of what the money was supposed to enable. The real risk on the resilience path, sequence of returns, is manageable. That's exactly what the cash buffer handles. Financial optionality means keeping your options open by holding the money. Experiential optionality means keeping your options open by using it. Both have value, but experiential optionality expires. At some point, the choice gets made without you. You spent 30 to 35 years building this. The question at this point isn't how much you can safely withdraw. The question is what you're optimizing for. Here's the short version of everything we covered. The math is still on your side. Historically, about half of retirees who withdrew 4% annually ended up with close to 3 times what they started with. 90% of 30-year periods going back to 1870 ended with more money than when retirement began. The history is still on your side. The one thing that isn't on your side is the brain you built over 35 years of saving. It was the right brain for accumulation. It's a harder fit for the spending phase. 3 things that help. First, a spending permission number, a concrete signal from your own portfolio that tells you when you've earned the right to take a little more. Second, a cash buffer of 18 to 24 months in something stable, kept separate from your investments. That's the structure that lets the rest of the portfolio do its job without you selling at the wrong time. Third, run your actual numbers with a forward-looking tool, not someone else's scenario, yours. And if you're single, before you apply any rule of thumb you've heard in a retirement video, run the 3-bucket check. Confirm that bucket 1, your fixed income, covers at least 60% of your baseline expenses. The couple's framework doesn't transfer directly, and the gap matters. The goal was never to die with the largest number in your account. It was to build enough that you'd actually use it. WisInvestor isn't about getting rich on paper. It's about using what you've built while you still can. If this landed somewhere useful, leave a comment and tell me where you are in the process. Still accumulating, getting close to retirement, or already there and wrestling with the spending side? I read every comment. That's how I know what to make next.